And welcome back to another episode of Voice for Good. I'm Elliot K. I am your host. And may I say that now I can officially say, and you might have heard me say this already, I am a two-time best-selling author. That's right. My book, Speak, Influence, Sell, went straight to Amazon bestseller. And now I can say I have a two-time best-selling author. Whoop, 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 whoop. And as always, this episode is hosting a legend in his own right. And if you want to know more about Adam, who's with us, Adam Strong, read the bio, because I say that every episode, read the bio, because I want to get straight to the nitty gritty. And this season, as you know, is all about the talk that made you. And Adam, I know, has got a lot of experience speaking. He's spoken internationally. He's got a lot of hours. He's a former peak performer in terms of running and things like that. But again, read the bio if you want to find out more about that. Adam, first of all, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Great to be here, Elliot.
And what I want to ask you, first of all, is what was the talk that made you?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think the talk that really kind of made me, and it's interesting because we were talking about speaking, right? I remember my very first speech, Elliot. And my very first speech was actually a corporate gig at a law firm in London.
Oh, yes. Go on.
And this was one of these, I suppose, lunch and learn events, right? And
lawyers are always good stories.
Yeah, they are always good stories, right? So the firm, like I built up a relationship with the, I think it was like the HR manager. And she loved some of the things that I was doing. I think she found my book, or I sent her a copy of my book, and she loved some of the techniques in the book. She was like, hey, so I'd love for you to come in and talk about, this methodology and this. I was like, okay, no worries, we can do that. So I said, how long we got? 60 minutes, all good. And this was probably right at the very beginning of, like, I suppose, my speaking engagement journey more than anything else. Yeah. And I remember turning up, right? And I planned out, my slides and that kind of, like, for me, I'm not one of these speakers that is kind of death by PowerPoint. I like to try and get some sort of interactivity. Do you know what I mean, Elliot?
Yeah. You mean you like to engage your audience? That's crazy talk.
What's that all about?
What's that? What do you mean engage the audience?
Engage the audience. But, I found it particularly challenging because, maybe some of your listeners are, or of people that are that are lawyers or solicitors, and they're consistently thinking about, when do I go back to my desk to earn money, because they're trading time for pounds. So I felt this kind of, and it was really weird. So I started doing my speech and whatever it is and sharing my story. And, when you have a connection with someone, you really feel it. Well, this audience probably was quite the opposite.
No connection.
No connection whatsoever. And I was like, did I do something wrong here? I was like sharing my story. I talked to them about, and literally, and I kind of, at the end of it, I felt good about it and that kind of stuff. And then the HR manager got back to me. She's like, hey, so we've had the feedback and it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. And I was like, okay, but that's what we discussed, type of thing. But anyway, so cut a long story short,
So we're not paying you and you can't sue us because we're lawyers.
Basically, in a nutshell. But they'd already paid me anyway or whatever.
Oh, that's okay. But,
so that was kind of cool. But it was just like a really strange feeling, being in this room of lawyers. And there must have been around, I probably reckon about 30 or 40, but you could really see that they really didn't want to be there. And number one, but number two, they didn't want to show vulnerability. And I really found that kind of very alien. Obviously, yes, we were strangers. I was strangers to the audience, but I found it really alien and things like that. So it was a really uncomfortable first speaking of engagement more than anything else. But, moving on from that, many, many years down the line, obviously, Elliot, you were part of it. We did the Game Changer Summit, which launched May of this year, 2020.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think for me, that was the one talk or seminar or summit, should we say, that really, I suppose, was well remembered for the right reasons. In my eyes, because it really hit a number of different things. Number one, it served a purpose. And I think that I think that if you are going into public speaking, is that you got to think to yourself, okay, well, what is my message? So that's what the first thing I did is I created a message, right? I created the message of, let's work together. Let's lean in, learn some new skills while we can.
Yep.
And essentially, let's try to grow our businesses. So that was kind of my message,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had to create the vision and I had to create the message first of all. And then off the back of that, I started studying. It's a bit like I remember I still do these, study TED Talks, TED Talks. These are the types of advice that you give to some of your students. Study the different speakers and how they interact with things and stuff like that. And with summits, digital summits in particular, is that there were some summits, I would say the majority of the summits that I actually came across were not very well executed.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't very systemized. And number three, it was always about the organizer.
Right.
It came from a place of ego rather than purpose. And that wasn't me. Those are me, Elliot. That's not my values. My values is all around coming from a place of purpose. So it's purpose-driven values is what I'm about.
Yep.
So I kind of dwelled up with this idea. I studied some of the summits that were working well and some that weren't. And, when we went down into, when we all went down into the kind of the lockdown type of thing, which was back in the middle of March in the UK, but different countries, depending on when you listen to this, where you listen to it, will depend. But I started the initial stages of the summit back in the beginning of March, because I could already foresee, what was going to happen off the back of this. Do you know what I'm saying? So then from there, it took 7 weeks for it to launch. So that was
well.
So it was like we went at the speed of lightning. By the way, we went at the speed of lightning, which was fantastic. Collaborated with some big influencers, as you know, with Jack Canfield, Dr. John DeMartini, Sharon Lechter, all of the big influencers collaborated with those guys. And they all come from a place of value. And that's what I love about them. But I think for me it wasn't just a combination of one particular, I suppose, speech or seminar. This was value to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Number one, it got me uncomfortable because I've never done a virtual summit ever in my entire life, by the way. It was the very first time I had planned it out and whatever it is. And the amount of sheer hard work that went into that summit was just insane. I had 6 full-time staff on that. And the beauty about it is that, so, it was 30 days. In fact, I think maybe 31 or 32 days of just continuous content with some of the world's leading industry authorities. So I think for me,
of course, I was on there. So yeah,
and you were on there, of course, and you were one of the highlights, of course.
Of course.
And
Jack Canfield.
Yeah, don't worry about any of those guys. Elliot, it was all about Elliot.
Always about me. I
know. But for me, I really enjoyed that, and I think off the back of that, there were a lot of things that really opened up for me. And I think if it wasn't for the summit, I think if it wasn't for the speeches and the value that we came from and the message, I don't think it would. I'm a strong believer that I don't think that those opportunities would have come about as much as they are right now. I don't believe that. I don't think that the impact of the summit would have been as successful if we'd have been in, because most of us were in kind of a lockdown phase. That's the reason why I think that, because a lot of people were working from home, I think that had also an advantage as well. But more, and I think that the other thing as well, especially from my perspective, is that it brought this brand awareness, and off the back of that, Elliot, we've got, the Game Changer Summit, and then it came off the Game Changers experience. We've created that theme of Game Changers, right? So, and people love that name, by the way. I get so many great comments from some of our influencers, and they're like, hey, I love your concept of game changers, right? I just love the name. So brand awareness, it created this massive brand awareness. It kind of put us on the roadmap in the entrepreneurial world more than anything else.
Yep.
But then I've just kind of lost count how many podcast interviews that I've done. I've lost count how many opportunities and collaborations that people have offered out to. So, I'm a big believer that the more that you serve the universe as such, the more that you will get back in return. Because I think that, and I kind of mentioned this actually on I think it was a podcast no, in fact, it was a podcast that I did on my own podcast actually, where I said, the more that you serve humanity, the more that you will get back in return.
I can tell you've interviewed John DeMartini, because that's a very John DeMartini thing to say. But absolutely, and it's very true. Like, the more you're of service, the more it comes back at you. I think the challenge with that kind of statement for a lot of people listening, they end up with the when's it going to come back? I'm always giving. And I think that's part of the challenge is remaining consistent and remaining truthful and pursuing a path without a timeline or a deadline that by this point I should be here. And I think that's something to remember about a lot of the listeners is true, because I think I found myself at various points in my life going, well, for how long more? Like, come on, I'm a good guy. I've done this. I've helped this. I've helped thousands of entrepreneurs. When's it going to come? But I think that's part of the moment you go, actually, that's the moment to go, you just keep doing.
But I think that there's a couple of things that I'll challenge you on that actually. And number one is, and I mentioned this actually last week, was if you have expectations, you'll become disappointed.
Absolutely, I agree.
So that's the first thing. So, and I think that's really, really important, because otherwise you start to also create a pressure on yourself, and you start to put pressure on yourself, and then it becomes stressful, and then you come from a place of ego rather than a place of service, and then the connection between you and the person that you're speaking to, or a potential client, or whatever it is, they're going to feel that disconnection, and it's really strange, Elliot, because it's all about understanding someone's energy levels. I always go with my gut instinct. If it feels good, then I go with the flow. Because most people think with their head, or they think with their heart.
Yep.
But you need to think with your gut instinct. And so when someone has that gut instinct and it doesn't feel right, they won't go with it. It's as simple as that. And then you start to, again, question your integrity. Am I a good person? And I've been down that road, Elliot. I know exactly where you're coming from. I don't know
an entrepreneur that isn't. Doesn't.
That's emotion for you. We're only human beings. So I think that, from my perspective, that's where it needs to kind of stay with, really. So not to have expectations. That's the first thing. And the second thing that I was going to say to you actually was, what was that? I lost it now. Damn it. We'll come back to it.
We'll come back to it. So, so you've kind of you've given us is two different contrasts, like your first speaking gig, awful, on the face, kind of like, swallow me up almost, without realizing about swallowing up. And that is a really horrible feeling when you come off this and you look up and there's zero connection and zero interest, and you've got to keep going, right? That's the other thing, of course. Like, you can't go, do you know what, guys, go back to your office, sod you lot, just I'm paid, sod you, go back to. And then what you're talking about now is in contrast, really why we've dedicated a season to this. So for you, it's a summit that kind of made you. What it's done, it's opened up opportunity, it's raised your profile, it's got you out there, it's got your name out there. And of course, it now has an extension, right? It didn't just end at the summit. It's got a variety of different elements to it, which is great. And of course, what's underneath that is being of service, right? And I remember when we first discussed the concept, you're like, hey, how can we help people? What can we do to really help people out there right now? And you've really, followed that through. So kudos to you. What do you feel that's done from you on the inside, following through 7 weeks of sheer hell? I remember when you said to me, hey, I want to do a summit. I said, well, you better get used to admin work. Do you remember that? I was like, you're going to have a lot of admin work to go through. But what do you think it's done for you as a person by creating this summit?
It's a really good question, actually. And I think for me is that I actually feel really content if I'm honest with you. I feel like I really accomplished something really this year, because I've impacted a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about a small amount of people. I'm talking about thousands of people have been impacted through some of the work that we've done.
Yep.
So that's first. So I feel happy and content, not just from my achievements, but also I feel happy and content because I feel fulfilled that I am essentially, I suppose, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm aligning the values that I have as a person, but I'm potentially, I feel like I'm giving of service, you know, to the maximum point that I can give. You know, for me, I'm a big believer is that if you are focused on a project, like for you, Elliot, when you release the book, for example, I go all in or not at all, right? So for me, I went in all in with this particular summit, right? I went all in, literally everything else was canceled apart from the summit. And because I literally focused and I delivered my A game off the back of that, that's where it came off. And, you know, and I think it's really, really important to, you know, I just really feel happy and content, but I've also found flow. I found momentum, you know, and I think it's, and I think you already know this, but I also had a newborn baby as well in between having the summit, which was challenging. A newborn baby as well as having a 2-year-old at home. So it was extremely a lot of hard work, and a lot of people that know me personally, you know, they take their hat off to me and that kind of stuff because of, you know, having young kids running around, you know, that like that, Elliot. It's extremely challenging. But no, I really feel like I've found my flow. I found my momentum. You know, I really see the value in content in, you know, for us, like me and my marketing team, for example, we essentially take some of the things that we got from the summit, some of the things that we got from the podcast that we've got launched now, which is the Game Changers experience. And we basically take it into different forms of content. So we are able to maximize the reach and impact more people. So I really am extremely happy and content with it just feels right. Do you know what I mean? It feels like I'm really aligning myself to my values and my passions more than anything else. Because I see so many people that, number one, are doing something because someone else told them to do so, right? And, you know, we live in a society where we're always judging ourselves against other people. And that just drives me insane, because never judge a book like what's on social media. You don't really see what people know on the back end of that. You know what I mean? And I think that people have really got to be subconscious about that. But as long as you're doing as long as you're doing your best, right, you know, and never comparing yourself to others, I think that's really, really important. So, and for me, you know, being a former elite athlete, as you know, and that kind of stuff, I'm such a results orientated mindset conditioned person, where I'm so addicted to helping people, because one of my big values is always helping people. And now some people might say, well, hang on a minute, Adam, you know, everyone says they like to help people, but there's helping people, and then there's genuinely and authentically helping people on a different level. It's completely different. So yeah, and I really do feel like I'm in a good place.
So it's helped you be content, and you really feel like you're serving and you're generally helping people. And of course, having been a part of that summit, I've seen the impact, I've seen the growth, not you, and just also externally, and the community it's created as well, and the connections it's created, and the friendships it's created as well. All you need now is a romantic relationship to come out of it, and you've kind of done it all, really, when it comes down to the game change. Maybe you can do game changer dating. I don't know, that could be another thing.
Not gonna be me, I'll tell you that for sure.
No, I know, but you know, so you've covered a lot. So for people like out there right now who kind of like might be struggling, or to get their voice heard, to get themselves out there, to be seen, to be heard, which is what we talk about a lot on this podcast. What would you say to people who might, let's go with this. What would you say to people right now who have an idea, right? And they've got their gut saying, oh my God, it's a great idea. But they might have people going, me, that's a great idea. Or they might have, limiting belief within them. Like, what would be your tips for those people right now?
My tips really is an idea is great, but without implementation means nothing. So if you look at my example for the summit, I have zero experience in running summits. Right. Okay. I had to learn how to systemize everything to make it go on an autopilot. I had to learn copy in a very short amount of time, even though I work with a copywriter. So there were so many things that I had to do at the end of the day. But I think one thing that I've noticed right now, Elliot, and this is very, very true for a lot of people listening in right now, is it's not always about the strategy. Okay.
It's about the execution.
It's about the execution, correct. It's about the action taken off the back of that. So I know there's a lot of people thinking, how do I do this? How do I do, what's the strategy? What is the methodology or whatever it is? But it's not about that. It's actually about going back to foundations. And foundations is, number one, does it align to your values? Number two, have I got the right message right? Number three, have I got a connection? Number four, does it serve others? And number five, where does it lead to at the end of it? So say, for example, one of your listeners wanted to create a summit, or you're executing and you want to go and, get into public speaking, or you're rearing up and you're getting prepared for your first summit or whatever it is. What is the preparation stages? What are you doing to prepare yourself for success and whatever it is? So some of the things that I learned off the summit, Dr. John DeMartini, we just talked about him, coming from a place of values, Jack Canfield, which is all around, success principles, visualization. What are you doing to visualize yourself and setting yourself up for success? Because all of this stuff really works. It really does. I know that because I was probably, like some of your listeners, the typical type of person that is kind of a bit of a know-it-all and thinks, oh, well, it's quicker and easier to do it myself.
You're not a know-it-all, are you?
I'm not a know-it-all.
Of course not.
Definitely not. But there's also, some of your listeners are also perfectionists, and trying to wait for the right time or the right place and the right environment, throw all of that out the window and just do it. That's kind of had that attitude of just do it, get it out there, right, and see where it takes you.
The lessons.
Lessons, exactly, because at the end of the day, you can only learn something, right, by doing.
Yes, absolutely. And
you can only make mistakes by doing too. And if you learn those mistakes, and when you go back to, and it's a gift for public speaking, if you start to learn those mistakes, like I gave you the example of my first speech, you learn from those mistakes, and then you think, okay, well, what is it that what are the areas of improvement that I need to make? Yeah. And This is how you, as a person, as a human being, as an entrepreneur, as a speaker, you build brand awareness of yourself. Yeah. And you start to evaluate yourself, and you start to think to yourself, okay, well, I know that I need to make those improvements. I enjoy that and I detest that. So what can I delegate out here, and what strengths can I really focus on my strengths? Because I always say to a lot of my students is focus on your strengths and delegate your weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I've always wondered, I really don't like sneezing. So I wonder if I can delegate that. Have you know anyone that can take on my sneezing? I just think it's such a waste of time. Right. But yes.
It's so true.
That's what you're talking about, right? I think it's more like tasks and things like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. 100%.
No, and it makes a lot of sense, right? And I think a lot of people do get caught up more in the kind of like, oh, I must do this stuff versus the stuff that really gives them joy. And then, of course, they have the excuse of, well, I can't afford to hire someone. And then, the fact is you'll either spend time or money. And if you're spending the money in the right way, then you're going to get the time back to make more money. But if you're spending the time, then you can't get that back.
It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned the word excuses, because I think I've probably used so many excuses in the world. And that's the thing, is that I could say I've got no time, I've got no money, I can't afford to do this. But actually, in reality, if it was that important to you, number one. Number two is that nothing is impossible unless you can work it out.
Right.
Now, I could use the excuse of, well, I don't know systems, I don't know this, and I don't know that, and whatever it is, and then I can't do it.
Right.
But then it's a bit like if you come across a big brick wall or a hurdle, you know, you're just going to give up, and you're not going to find different ways in which you can maneuver and try to find a different way. There's always a way, because it's the same thing. If you, for anyone that's got children, for example, and they need to have had a heart operation, and the surgeon turn around and say, well, it's going to cost you £1 million, right? You're going to turn around to the surgeon and say, oh, by the way, I can't afford it. No, you're not. It's exactly the same concept. It's just in a different scenario.
Yeah, it's the urgency, it's the desire, it's the passion.
100%, exactly. And I know it's a bit of an extreme example, but it's how you essentially come across it from a different perspective. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible. It's all about the belief that you have as a person, and and it's a mindset more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is your speciality, right? That's
Absolutely.
what you specialize in. So brilliant. So some really great tips and some fantastic insights there today in this podcast. I think it's interesting because we've gone into many different directions, but it's the same topic. And it's really been about how to better yourself and how to go after something you really, really want, how to eliminate excuses, how to be purpose driven, and how to just simply get stuff done. Like just get it done and then figure out later. It's that whole say yes first and then figure out how I'm going to do it. And also just adding to that, one of the most powerful things I learned is it's not about the how, it's about the who. And then if you can figure out who can help you get it done, then you can figure out the how to get it done as well. So that's something to remember by. So if people want to connect with you, Adam, if people want to find out more, what do they do? Where do they go? Do they go to Amarillo? Like, well, come on. What's the way here? What's the way?
If you guys want to connect with me, I'll be happy to do so. You can go to my website, adamstrong.net, or alternatively, you're very welcome to come and listen to the Game Changers Experience as well, which is available on all the podcasting platforms from Apple to Stitcher to Google, whatever it might be, whatever your preferred platform
on
is.
any podcast platform, you will find the Game Changer Experience.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant. Adam, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your experience, your insight, your knowledge, your mindset, your tips. It's been brilliant. I've enjoyed it. And as I'm going to end every podcast, I'm always going to say this. Remember, people, be seen, be heard, and always use your voice for good. Till the next episode, I'll see you all soon.